Cuffer, faggot, coconut, nigger. These are just some of the names that I've been called throughout my life. And I'd bet money on the fact that everyone in this audience has been called at least one of the names I just mentioned. If not, something just as hateful. That hurt. That feels like acid corroding at your heart. Can you feel it? That venom slowly shutting you down. But pause for a second before you let yourselves fade into nothingness and ask yourselves, why are these names so degrading? I imagine that at this time, the image of a cruel person attacking on some aspect of your identity has popped into your minds. If we want a society where no one is held down by their oppressors, we need to let go of the past. We don't move forward by holding on to our oppression. We do so by making our oppressors irrelevant. So let's start with name calling. Also known as hate speech. As a recipient, our failure comes when we allow certain words to be offensive, because the minute you do so, you're playing the game on the enemy's terms. They're telling you what's rude, what's undesirable, what's wrong with you, and you're accepting that. But there's a way we can solve this. Reclaim the words that sting. Redefine them in a way that makes them ineffective, and those who try to harm you with them, irrelevant. It's actually easier for most of us millennials, considering we were born after most of the obvious oppression, and for those reasons, those words aren't direct triggers. Sorry, debater speech. So abandon the connotations. Use those words as positive identifiers, especially among friends and family. Claim the names. Own them as best one could. And when the time comes, teach your children to erase the hate behind those words and stop feeding them the venom of the past. When I was a young boy, a friend of mine came to school after an afternoon of MTV and started calling us all his niggers. At the time, we didn't know what the word meant, so it quickly became a frequent term used within our circle of friends. As you can imagine, this soon ended with all of us in time out, after receiving a long lecture on how bad that word is. That day was important to me for two reasons. Firstly, it was the day I learned that the word nigger even existed. But secondly, it was the first time of many that I'd be taught that certain words held some kind of destructive weight. We are brainwashed from a young age by our oppressors and false allies to be degraded, to be devalued, to be made vulnerable by arbitrary utterances. We arm the irrelevant with two-edged swords and leave ourselves completely exposed. So how do we dull the edges of these culling blades? Well, I'd like to show you the way with a little exercise. I'd like everyone here to think of the most offensive thing they've ever been called. Right? Right. Now think about who you are in comparison to the persona those words try to impose. Are you beautiful, perhaps? Smart? Talented? Successful? Now I want you to take the negative in the word that you thought of and replace it with the amazing qualities that I know you all have. I want you to imagine that it is you saying the word that you thought of, and not some cruel chop you thought of in the beginning of my speech. With that being said, I'd like everybody, when I finish counting down from 3, of course, to say, "My name is," state your name, "and I am," and quote the offensive term you thought of. Right? Right. 3, 2, 1. Totally awesome. Now, I'd like you to keep that outlook on any negativity that comes your way. Believe me, I understand that this looks like a difficult thing to do, especially since we, as human beings, are so adverse to change. But it's already being done. The word geek, which the Oxford Dictionary defines as someone who's either extremely interested in or extremely knowledgeable about a particular subject, is a name that many of us call ourselves with pride. It wasn't always that way, however. The word geek was once a pejorative. A geek was a person so disgustingly freakish that the only thing that they deserved was to be thrown and locked in a circus and stared at as they did things like bite their heads off of bats and other small animals. Society later, as it tends to do, became a bit more charitable and used the word to describe people who weren't the most socially adept. Fast forward to about 2014, 2015, where we are the smart ones. But I'd like to further prove my point by looking at words that have been exchanged in conflicts that are a bit more violent, a bit more historical, a bit more like the oppression we try to combat today. The word hysterical, which some of us may use to describe a situation or person that was extremely hilarious or just crazy, comes from the word hysteria, which back in its heyday was doctor speak for women be cray. Another example is the word savage, which a lot of us teenagers use, usually while in admiration or awe, while describing someone who's so awesome that they don't care about any negativity that comes their way. The word savage, back in its heyday, was our nigger. It was used to describe people that society deemed uncivilized. Coincidentally, those were usually people in countries that were being colonized at the time. On the flip side of the coin, we see redefinition being used for cruelty. Many of us will have experienced this when a term or word that shouldn't have been offensive was just as hurtful as any hate speech. And it usually boiled down to 2 things. Firstly, who said that name? But secondly, what they're implying in their speech. One of the best examples we have today of this, out of many, is the word retarded, which was once used to describe people with Down syndrome, but we now see it being used to describe people or situations that are either just stupid or not too great. It's that simple. And it should be known that the odds of us winning the war on word ownership is in our favor. There are more of us than there are them. We're smarter, more resilient, and the words that we plan to take back already have less than half the weight they had several years ago. So I'd like to end my speech with a message to the irrelevant. My name is Tariro Wafawarowa, and I am one savage faggot of a nigger. And in regards to the words you try and break me down with, frankly, my dear idiots, I don't give a damn.